awesome. Well, how are we? Oh, come on, it's fall retreat. You guys can do better than that. How are we? That's what I'm talking about. Have you guys had a good weekend so far? Guys, it's over. I know. Boo. This is so sad. But it's been a fun weekend, and it's been so fun getting to be with you guys. Just getting to see God move. As you guys know, this weekend we have been talking about the word redeem. And it's a word you guys have now heard probably 1,000 times. Sorry, my headset's all weird. There we go. And it's a word that's packed with a lot of meaning, and a lot of meaning that we've kind of lost because it's been used so much. It's a word that means to buy back from slavery. To buy back and to take the things that were once bent on bad, things that were consumed by sin, and turn them towards God. Turn them to beautiful things. And last night, Brian talked about how God is able to take even the ugliest of things, the cross, this thing that was a human form of torture, and make something so grotesque, something so beautiful in the person and work of Jesus Christ, to the point where we hang it on our walls. And so we've been tossed around this idea of redeem and watching God make beautiful things out of the mess. And that's what we've been seeing in our own lives. This morning I met with all of our leaders, and it was incredible. You know, we didn't talk a whole lot. We just shared story after story of how God moved, how God spoke, how God was in the business of redeeming, even just this weekend in each of your lives. And it was so encouraging just get to see in little pieces and big pieces the way that God was moving here this weekend. And it's awesome. This is why I love retreats, and this is why I get people so excited about retreats, is because you get to see this kind of stuff. But as I was talking with my small group on the first day, I noticed a consistent thread amongst a number of my students. And it was this thread of, I felt this way before. I felt this at last retreat. And yet as I go home, it seems like these feelings go away. And where God was so close and so real here at retreat and at camps, I go home and he gets distant. And I don't feel like I can feel him like I used to feel him. And this God that was so real here becomes kind of a memory when we go back home. Why is it that there's places like this on Sundays, at High Point, at retreats, where we feel so close to God, and yet we go home and he feels distant? Can anyone relate with that feeling? Yeah, virtually everyone. So this is a common problem, right? And this is something I want to hit on the head, because I don't think we're meant to live this way. I think God has something more for us. And so we're going to be looking at a passage. It's one of my favorites. It's in Romans 12. So if anybody has got a Bible, feel free to open up to that. And Paul's going to address this exact issue. So to give you a little bit of context, Paul in Romans has just laid out the gospel in 11 chapters. You can count it, 11 chapters. It's kind of nuts. You can imagine that Paul's audience by chapter 3 is like, Paul, we get it. We became Christians in chapter 3. What are we supposed to do now? But he's laid out that all have sinned, all have fallen short. And the work that Christ did on the cross pays for all of that. And that we can have life with him if we just accept it. So you can imagine they're like, well, what's next? What are we supposed to do now? And in chapter 12, this is where Paul addresses this exact issue. It's known as the great therefore. You find it at the beginning of verse 1, where it says, therefore. So basically, in light of all 11 chapters, all that we know about what Christ has come and done, this is the great therefore. This is what we're supposed to do because of that. And so picking up in verse 2, if you guys would, Paul says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that by testing you might discern what is the will of God, what is good, acceptable, and perfect. And this is a verse that we're going to camp on. This is it, just one verse. We're going to camp on it for the next 20, 25 minutes or so. Because there's so much meaning packed in each and every one of these words. This first word, so Paul starts out first. He says, do not be conformed by this world. And this word conformed, it means to mold into a pattern. You can think of, has anybody ever made Christmas cookies? Yeah, I love Christmas cookies. You can kind of think of like your snowman cookie cutter. You press it into the dough and it makes a shape. The dough itself is not fundamentally changed. It's the same, but it looks in a new shape. And Paul's saying, you don't want to be like a snowman Christmas cookie. You don't want to be just changed on the outside by this world. To give you guys kind of a little bit of an illustration, does anybody have Netflix? Yes. Has anybody ever binge watched a show?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so keep your hands up. Has anybody watched a show for longer than 2 hours? Longer than 4 hours? Longer than 6 hours? This is impressive. Longer than 8 hours? You guys need help. Longer than 10 hours? 12?
Yeah.
14?
Yes.
Longer than 24 hours? Oh my gosh, that is absolutely insane. Wow. So a little about me, when Shelby and I moved here to Colorado, we didn't have any friends, we didn't know anybody, and we were super bored all the time. And so we started binge watching this show called Grey's Anatomy. Anybody watch Grey's?
Yeah.
Love me some Grey's. This doctor, like, kind of mini-series show. And every morning we would wake up and we'd watch 3 episodes. And then we'd, eat breakfast, apply for a few jobs, watch 3 more episodes. We'd end up going to the gym, then watching 3 more episodes, eat dinner, and then watch episodes till we slept. Like, I did the math at one point, and literally every waking minute of that first month that we lived in Colorado, 15% of it was watching that show. That's including sleep, that's including everything else. Like, we were obsessed with this show. And what we found as we kept watching the show is that it started to change us. It started to influence us in ways that we immediately didn't recognize. So I'd kind of stand up fast from the couch, and you know how you kind of pass out every once in a while? I was like, pulmonary edema. I've got pulmonary edema. I'm gonna die. Or I get a headache or something. I'm like, brain tumor. It's gonna take me. I'm done. Or like Shelby, this affected her as well. Sorry to ruin it if anybody hasn't finished it, but I think in season 7 or something like that, McSteamy dies. Ooh, that's really sad. That was her favorite character. It wrecked us. Shelby was bawling her eyes out for 3 days, literally so sad. It was like we lost a close friend. It was because what we consume has the power to influence us. Does it not? And when you're completely enveloped in a show like this, these people become your friends. And the way that they're thinking become the way that you think. I became a medical expert, And that's the power that I think what we consume has on us. It has the power to influence us. And so Paul in this passage overall is going to be unpacking this idea that what we consume influences us. What you consume influences you. And so the way that we kind of look at this is we live in a world that's so crazy plugged in, right? I mean, we're constantly on phones. We've got music playing in our ears. We have no space for silence. And look at the kind of things that we're consuming. I mean, we've got cat videos. I was watching this the other day. They've got the Fresh Pug of Bel Air. So it's like the Fresh Prince, but he's wearing a jacket. They're dancing around. Cat videos, squirrel videos, GIFs, memes, advertisement, beer commercials. We are constantly just being invaded with various messages, right? We are constantly consuming things. And if the central truth is true, that what we consume has the power to influence us, what do you think this kind of consuming is doing to us? What do you think the things that you are consuming right now, how do you think they're influencing you? Paul's going to make the case that what you're consuming is influencing you in the way that it's shaping you into the pattern of this world. Paul says, do not be conformed by the pattern of this world. And there's another word. This word world is another one that we have to unpack the significance of. It's more accurately translated age or culture, present time. So he's saying, don't be conformed by this present time, this brief moment in history. Because Paul knows something. Paul knows that these things are passing away. Has anybody ever looked at pictures of your parents when they were in high school? They're all dorks, right? Why did you think that was cool at that time? I remember looking at my parents, and my mom had these gigantic glasses and big flowy hair. My dad had the most outrageous stash I've ever seen, just gigantic. Yeah, Topher gets it. Topher understands the stash. But what we found is he also had a cut-off t-shirts and this big no fear tattoo on his leg that was really cool at the time. It was bright green. But now he's this successful businessman, and he has to cover it up because that's not really acceptable in the working world. But this is the reality. These things that we once thought were cool become not cool. Have you guys experienced that in your own life yet? Anything you thought was so cool, and now looking back, you're like, I cannot even believe I wore that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So one of the things I did in the 4th grade, I had a bowl cut. Yeah, can you imagine this? Bowl cut? It's literally like a bowl, and then they shave around your head. It's really embarrassing. But my friends had one, and I thought it was cool, so I went and got a bowl cut. And as we look back, we see that these things were just temporary. They were just in this time. Paul's telling us you don't want to be conformed to something that's popular today and irrelevant tomorrow. And I imagine you guys are like, no, we dress cool today, like I'm going to escape this. But come on. Those tall socks with the flip-flops, that will not survive the passing of time. That will fade. High-waisted jeans, like that came and went. I can't believe that's back again. That's a thing. Pattern on pattern on pattern, that will not survive. I promise you that will not survive. And Paul's saying all of these things are passing away. This world, this time period is just trending. And it will be replaced by other things in the future. So Paul's saying, don't be conformed to this. But what are we supposed to do? This is the world that we swim in. We see this all around. We have all these influences and everyone's seeing it. How are we supposed to escape these things? Are we supposed to move into a cabin in the woods and completely unplug? Clearly we can't do that. There's not enough cabins in the world for that. So what's the alternative? What's the alternative to being conformed into the pattern of this world? So Paul goes on. He goes on in the next part. He says, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And this is another word that has a lot of meaning. I'm so sorry I keep doing this to you. But this word transformed, it's actually from the Greek word metamorphosis, for which we get the idea of a caterpillar being transformed into a butterfly. And so if we contrast that with what we just learned, that being conformed is like a cookie cutter, a snowman cookie cutter. The kind of transformation that Paul's looking for is one that fundamentally changes us from the inside out. I heard a lot of that this weekend as well as I spoke with the different small groups and students. It's like we don't want to just say these Christian things. We don't want to just look pretty on the outside. We want to be completely transformed. And that's what Paul's talking about. We want full and complete transformation. And I think we know the difference. We've seen the difference. We've seen it in different people. Being conformed is like the P90X. It's like the Atkins diet. It's like baby, baby, baby. Like all these things pass away. They promise great things and then they pass away. But being transformed is lasting. It lasts forever. And one of the things I loved about the whiteboard talks is we got to see those, is we got to see stories. And while the whiteboard talks were good, what I kept thinking as I was watching is, I know those people. And I've gotten to see the work that God's been doing, and I've got to see their story, and they are a new creation. God has taken those broken things and made them beautiful. That's the transformation that Paul's talking about here. And if I think we were really honest, that's the kind of transformation that we all want. We want lasting transformation. I think of my friend Scott. He and I joined a small group at around the same time when I first became a Christian. Kind of a goofy guy. He was kind of like a bland person. We all know those bland people. It's like, who are you? He didn't know who he was. He was trying to fit in everywhere in the party scene, in relationships. But then he encountered this guy, Jesus Christ. And he flipped his world upside down. And Scott joined our small group, and he began to, read his Bible in the mornings and go to church and surround himself by Christian friends. And slowly but surely, Scott changed. And this wasn't just an outward appearance change. He fundamentally changed. He was metamorphosed. And this guy who was kind of confused and wasn't quite sure who he was slowly became more confident. He became more bold. And in a really strange way, he became more Scott than he had ever been before in his life. As he dove into Scripture, as Christ transformed his life. And this guy without any kind of purpose went on, even in college, to build a nonprofit that fed over 30 orphans in Dandori, Kenya. This is a man whose life was fundamentally changed. And I think this is the kind of transformation that Paul's talking about here. We want to see this kind of transformation. But how the heck are we supposed to do it? We've all faced this reality. We come to places like this and we love it. We're consumed by it. We love God. But then we go home and we lose sight of it. What does it look like to maintain that? And in the second part of the verse, this is what Paul talks about. He says, by the renewing of your mind. That by testing you might discern what is the will of God, that which is good and pleasing and perfect. So Paul's saying we have to renew our mind. And essentially what this means is feed yourself the good stuff. Renew, that's kind of a fancy word. I couldn't quite figure out how to explain it. More accurately, it'd be feed yourself the good stuff. If what we consume influences us, then we need to be consuming the good stuff. We need to be consuming the real stuff. So there's kind of a central truth in this. Paul's pretty convinced that if you do try it, if you do taste it, you're going to like it. You're going to love it. You're going to want some more of it. Is that a song? And we know this is true. I'll come back to this in a second. But there's a second truth here that I want to hit at, and I think it hits at a lot of us here. We hunger for the things that we eat. You know, I'm lactose intolerant, and a few years ago I found that out. It was like the worst day of my entire life. Because I used to love dairy. I used to love cheese. I used to drink like lots of milk. At Applebee's, anybody ever work at Applebee's? That's good. It's all right. That's pretty okay. But what's nice about Applebee's or any restaurant generally is that they let you have some free food at the end of your shift. And what I used to always do is I would get four of these. I would get 4 Oreo cookie shakes, which is just straight ice cream and like ground up Oreos. And I would drink 4 of them. It's like 4,000 calories or something like that. And I loved it. I used to crave them all the time. But I used to also get really, really sick after eating them. Funny. I don't know how that works. I went to the doctor. They're like, you can't do this to yourself anymore. You got to stop eating dairy. And at first, it was really hard because I loved dairy. You know, I loved eating. I loved drinking my cereal in the mornings. But slowly but surely, I stopped craving it. I wasn't eating it. I recognized that it was harmful. And slowly but surely, I didn't even crave it anymore. And while that's true, the opposite is also true. If you start eating vegetables and fruits at first, you're like, oh, this is kind of gross. I don't really like this. But as you start eating that diet, you start to hunger for those things. And while this is true with like food and stuff, this is also true with our spiritual life. I've talked to a number of students who have expressed that like it's hard to wake up in the mornings and read their Bible. And sometimes they just get forced to go to youth group. They don't even want to come. They don't want to do these things. And I think it's because of this truth. You know, we hunger for the things that we have lots of. And so if you're feeling distant, if you're feeling far off from God right now, if it's so hard to come to small group or to read your Bible or to pray, it could be because you don't have a healthy diet of it. And what will happen is you begin to eat those things, you'll begin to hunger for them. So if God's feeling distant, if he's feeling far off, if you're lacking the motivation to do those things that you know are really healthy for you, start trying a diet of it. So I think this is the kind of the central truth that Paul's trying to get at here. We hunger for what we eat a lot of. And so we want to feed ourselves the good stuff. I think of the challenge that you guys are all facing, because we come to these camps and things are good. Think about what we've been doing all week. You know, we've been worshiping together. We've been listening to teaching. You guys have been an awesome community with friends. And we felt God move. You know, I heard story after story of God moving in powerful ways. And you will leave this place so energized, so hungry for God. That's just the reality of retreats like this. But then we go home, and we're not feeding ourselves those things as much. And maybe we start out really good, but slowly but surely we start to kind of drift away. You know, we don't wake up as early as we used to. We don't go to small group as much as we used to. And then the strangest thing happens. God starts feeling distant. He starts feeling far off. And so what Paul's telling us in this text is that we have to fight this. You know, we have to fight this. We have to constantly paddle upstream. The image that kind of comes to mind, if you can think about it, has anybody ever kayaked? It's Colorado. You guys should kayak. Yeah, there's a few of you that kayak. So when you're trying to paddle upstream, it's exhausting. You know, you have to work 3-4 times as hard to paddle upstream because there's a constant stream that's pushing you back. And when I think about you guys, the image that comes to mind is you guys go home, as you guys close your Bible in the morning, as you guys walk out those doors, there will be a steady stream that's trying to push you in the way of the world, trying to conform you into its image. And what Paul's talking about here is that we have to paddle. We have to paddle hard. You know, we have to continue to feed ourselves the good stuff, you know, the stuff of God. And I imagine some of you, some of us are on board here, but other of us are like, yeah, that sounds good, but I kind of like the way of the world. If I was really honest, I like going too far physically with my girlfriend. I like partying too much. I really like my things. I like buying things. I'm not quite sure I buy into this Christianity thing. It sounds kind of boring. I'm kind of loving the way of the world. And so what Paul tells us is, look at the fruit of that. I think about the lies of this culture that we kind of buy into. Me, myself, I kind of view it as like a TV dinner. Does anybody eat TV dinners? Yeah, they're horrible. Don't do it. But it always offers such a great promise. I love going down the aisles. It's like so cold. They're like in little time capsules or whatever. And every single meal is like brightly colored. And it's the promise of this delicious cooked meal in 3 minutes. Right? Beautiful outsides. But when you take it home, like this weird thing happens where somehow it died on the way home. It's like gray now. The chicken fried steak is underneath the peas. The mashed potatoes and gravy are all smushed together. Like it never lives up to its expectation. And you always are left with one or two things. You're always more hungry than when you left, or you spend some time on the toilet, right? It always leaves you feeling empty or feeling sick. And when I think about the food that we're consuming, the things that we're consuming in this culture, it's a lot of that. It's a lot of things that promise something really great and to deliver something empty or leave you feeling sick. When I was in high school, I believed these things. I bought into a few of these lies. I bought into the lie that partying and drinking would make me the life of the party. That I could just be myself. I would be free. Instead, it left me making a fool of myself at parties and social situations. Instead, it left me at 3 a.m. puking my brains out in a trash can as the world spun around. What promised such great left me feeling really empty. I also bought into the lie that being a virgin is uncool, and that you have to figure out sex before you get married. And so leaving high school, I tried to throw away my virginity as quickly as possible. And it promised some really good things. But instead, it was like pouring gasoline on an unhealthy relationship. Instead, it left me completely blind to some really big red flags. And it made me think I was madly in love with someone that I wasn't really in love with. And ultimately, it left me terribly in a devastated breakup for both of us. It promised good, but delivered bad. That's the reality of the TV dinners of our culture. And what are the other, we all do this. What are the other TV dinners that we kind of buy into today? I think of the idea that my identity is found in what other people think of me. And so we're constantly moving from group to group, trying to get affirmation. If these people are doing this, then I'm going to do this. And we're searching and searching for a place to belong. Our identity is wrapped up in what other people think of us. Whereas the God of the universe is telling us, your identity is found in what I think of you. Your identity is found in who I've created you. Or girls. How often do we buy into this lie? That if I was thinner, if I was prettier, if I was cuter, then maybe this guy would like me. Then maybe I'd be worthy of love. When the God of the universe is saying, you do not have to be skinnier to be worthy of love. When he's saying, I have created you. I love you. I have a plan and a purpose for you, and it's much bigger than what this guy thinks of you. And there are guys out there that will see this and see how God sees you and love you for that. Don't buy into these lies. Or the lie that if I just have this thing, this new shiny iPhone, this new video game, whatever it is, then I'll be happy. How many times do we have to play that one out? Where we get the thing that we've wanted for so long, for Christmas, for our birthday, and it never brings happiness. It's happy for like a minute, it's happy for a day, but then it slowly drifts away. Or guys, the idea that we constantly have to have it all together. Where I'm fine. That's the response. I love this whenever I leave like my small group. It's like, hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. You guys have to act like we've got it all together, like nothing affects us. We buy into this idea that if I just work harder and try harder, or maybe tomorrow will be different, then I'll be happy. I have all that I need within myself to be happy. And so we go to things like numbing and escaping because that's not our reality. Oh, that was scary. Because that's not our reality. Whoa! That's fancy. I'm going not move. Maybe that happened. But these are the various lies that we buy into. These are the TV dinners. They promise good, but they deliver bad. Consistently. Jason. I think we're good. Maybe? Hello? Are we free? Yeah, look at us. There we go. I can walk with freedom. So when I think about all these things, these are the things that we buy into consistently. They promise good, they deliver bad. When the God of the universe is standing beside us saying, I have better things for you. You were made for more than this junk food, this stuff that cannot satisfy. You are a child of God, created in His image, to be transformed fully. But to do that, we have to consume the good stuff. And we have to make time to consume the good stuff. I mean, if we were to create a pie chart right now of the rest of your week, what you're going to go into leaving this camp, I mean, how would it be spaced? We'd have a big circle. You know, we got 6 to 8 hours of sleeping, 8 hours of school. We've got homework. Maybe we've got a job. We've got hanging out with friends, video games, maybe listening to music. Where's the space for God? How much does He end up getting? He gets this tiny sliver. Maybe it's like a prayer before you go to bed, or 5 minutes when you wake up. And think about the difference of that between what we just did here this weekend, where we prayed together, we're in community together, where we worship together. God felt so close here. He felt so real because you were consuming so much of Him. And we hunger that, right? But you guys are going to leave this place and you're going to go back to your schools, back to your homes. And this is going to be your reality. How can we give God more than just that tiny sliver? Because that tiny sliver is not, it's a tiny crouton. What God wants to do is He wants to transform all of us. He wants to continue the work that He started here to make ugly things into beautiful things. But you guys are going to have to paddle upstream, and it's going to be really hard. What we consume influences you. What you consume influences you. And so we're going to end this retreat kind of the same way that we did last year. I love this image. We're going to do communion. And so Brian's going to come up and he's going to kind of start playing. And this is going to be a physical reminder of a spiritual reality. You know, what we consume influences us. And so what I'd love for this to be is for this to be a symbol for us of that reality. That we're tired of eating this junk food that does not satisfy. We want the real thing. We want total and complete transformation. Not just looking pretty on the outside, not just saying Christian things, not just good intentions, but we want to see the real life kind of transformation. And so as we take this bread, on the night that Jesus was betrayed, He broke the bread. He said, "This is my body which was broken for you." We realize that redemption came at a price. And that price was Jesus Christ on the cross. And He was broken for us. And while He said those words on the night that He was betrayed, His disciples didn't quite get it. They were like a lot of us here. We see the words, but they were empty. But I want for us, as we think about this, that as we think about His body broken on that cross, beaten to a pulp, spit on, humiliated, our redemption came at a price. Our redemption was nothing less than all of Christ. And as He took a cup, He said, "This is my blood, the sign of the new covenant." The covenant that meant that we could come back into relationship with God, that we could have a relationship with Him, that He would fill us with the Holy Spirit and continue the work of redemption in our lives. And so what we're going to do, I'm going to have everybody stand here in a second. And the elements are over here. We've got bread and wine. And I want you to just tear off a piece of the bread, dip it into the cup, as a sign and a declaration that you're tired of the junk food of this world and you want the real thing. For those of you here that are with us that are not Christians, we are so excited that you're here. If this is something that doesn't quite make sense to you or isn't real for you, please just continue to stay seated. We are just so thankful that you're here. But for those of us that claim Christ as Lord, that recognize what these elements mean, I'm going to invite you guys to stand up. And we're going to kind of flow row by row. Just come by, grab the elements, and return to your seat. and let us pray.